Hi everyone, welcome to day 2 of the California Water Safety Summit. Really happy to see you here. Hopefully you enjoyed yesterday. It was informational. You met some new folks. And thanks again for coming last night to the networking happy hour. We had a good time. This morning's session is an opportunity for us to do some learning and growing in a really critical space in the drowning prevention sector. And more importantly, this is an opportunity to take the learning and really bake it into the DNA of the California Water Safety Coalition. Yesterday, several of the presentations laid a foundation for the conversation that we're going to have this morning. We started yesterday with Dr. Clemens from the CDC talking about on the national level, the persistent racial and ethnic disparities in the drowning burden in the United States. That was shortly followed by Dr. Stewart and Dr. Bradley from the California Department of Public Health, who reflected on what those disparities look like at our state. And then we even heard yesterday from Renee Jackson about what some of that looks like at the local level in LA County. Throughout yesterday in the panel discussions as well, again and again it kept coming up, the conversation around working with communities that have high burdens of drowning. We know that there are racial and ethnic disparities not only in the burden, but also there's gaps, huge gaps in aquatic participation. California is an extremely diverse state in a lot of different ways, and so we are aware that this is a really important area for us to do some learning in, but we also know that the learning doesn't stop at the end of this session. So it is my real honor to introduce Dr. Miriam Lynch from Diversity in Aquatics. Dr. Lynch is an advocate for increasing water safety education, creating equitable resources, and creating opportunities in aquatics. She has been privileged to serve as the executive director of Diversity in Aquatics, which is an organization whose diverse network of aquatic professionals, enthusiasts, and researchers who are working to eliminate drowning disparities, expose the systemic policies that create barriers towards participation in aquatics, and access as well. Her and her team of diverse and talented individuals work to educate, promote, and support all aquatic sports and activities, especially for communities who have been historically marginalized and under-resourced in aquatic activities and education. And Dr. Lynch will also introduce her colleagues who are going to walk us through this conversation this morning. Please help me welcome Dr. Miriam Lynch.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Wait, first of all, good sunny California. Good morning here. And it is, as Will said, it is my distinct pleasure to be here in front of each of you and to be joined by the panelists that we've assembled here today. I'm going to first introduce Mr. Byron Davis up to our stage here. Welcome, Byron Davis. Growing up in swimming, Byron didn't realize the impact he made by doing what he did into the pool. For many people like myself, who was a swimmer, he paved the way to say that representation matters. Wow, look at where I can go. He's a 100 butterflyer national champion. He is an assistant coach, a former assistant coach at UCLA. He is now a motivational speaker, a father, and an advocate for others to be their best selves in and out the pool. And so with distinct pleasure having you join side by side here today on the stage. Thank you. In addition, we are also joined by Mr. John Abdou, so from U.S. Water Polo. He is the Chief Performance Officer for U.S. Water Polo, and you'll also hear from John about the many things that him and his team, his task force, have done to push DEI efforts so that it isn't just a one-stop shop, a check mark, but really making a change within the whole U.S. Water Polo system. So Mr. John Abdou is also welcoming. And then last but not least, joining us via Zoom, so thank goodness for technology, right? I have my mentor, a person who has paved my way as well, is Dr. Angela Beale-Tawfeeq. She is a professor at Rowan University and a lead researcher into this realm of water safety, public health, and advocacy in aquatics. She serves as our research chair as a part of diversity in aquatics, as well as she has written a number of articles on this effort, talking about coded policies, which we'll talk about today, and more in aquatics. She also serves on the Scientific Advisory Council for the American Red Cross. So please welcome Dr. Beale virtually from Philadelphia. So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Beale to get us started on one of our traditions that we always do as part of our presentations.
Well, thank you. And it's a pleasure to meet you all. I get to be the floating head in the room. Yay. First and foremost, it is a pleasure to be with the partners in this work. We would like to thank California Water Safety Coalition for their desire to build bridges and collaborations rather than barriers, which support the global call to action around drowning as a neglected public health issue. While we are discussing diversity, equity, and inclusion work in this short session, the work does not stop here. Diversity in Aquatics is a national organization which works collaboratively with others to support, educate, and promote local efforts while bringing historically and culturally relevant programs and supportive efforts to communities of Black, Brown, and Indigenous people of color, to change the current statistics in aquatics and to create opportunities for healthy aquatic engagement. Harambe. Harambe is a Swahili greeting often heard during Kwanzaa, which calls for a time of acknowledgement and pulling together. Kwanzaa and land acknowledgements like this are a time to strengthen our collective, a time when we honor our past, critically evaluate our present, and commit ourselves to a fuller, more productive future. With this understanding, we of Diversity in Aquatics acknowledge that as we stand here in California today, we acknowledge that we stand on the unceded ancestral lands of the Achachamen and the Tongva people, and we acknowledge their care of these lands. We must understand that such an acknowledgement does not negate the history of our country or a group of people. It is our united history. Let us right now all save pools, save and create programs to save lives. Historically, swimming pools have been a source of inequity when it comes to the distribution of recreation services in the United States and here in California. As you look at your communities, your cities, your organizations, your programs, our country, we must harness the energy and power of this greatness to advocate, engage community planning and policy making that protect the recreation infrastructure in our communities and move the needle of social justice towards equity, equitable provision and distribution of aquatics programming and facilities in all historically underrepresented communities to save lives like mine. Diversity in Aquatics acknowledges when the waters were ours and our history as maritime people and those who stood and continue to stand as we historically and presently face the contested waters. We acknowledge the greatness and history of this work as we are water, like our 1619 project tells. And let us right now all save pools, save and create programs to save lives.
Yes, there we go. Thank you, Dr. Beale. So starting off with a couple of norms that part of our presentation, we'll switch to that. Gotta love technology, right? Perfect. So right now we're going to go through our norms, and this is a safe space for us. And that we're having, one of the things that we're talking about is spilling the tea, right? Very coachy. But being transparent, we're being engaging, and we're also making sure that we are coming with our authentic selves, okay, into this discussion. And there are going to be opportunities within the discussion to be able to ask questions, talk about some of the things that have become our barriers towards where we're trying to create this more equitable piece in aquatics. And what does that mean, equitable? But some first norms, Dr. Beale is going to share with us some norms for this discussion as we go through, because that's important in this DEI work. So take it away, Dr. Beale.
Thank you. So it's funny in this day and age, we're going to talk about norms in a time that we understand everyone's translation of that is different, right? But it's all blessed and warranted. So we'd like to just reveal, when we talk about this work, there's some etiquette and expectations that we like to share when we talk about this work in whatever environment we are. So what we want you to embody and take this journey with us is that we want you to understand that we appreciate that everyone in the room has good intentions and also biases. And so as we all engage in this discussion, we want to encourage everyone to know that everyone is doing their best that they can from your current state of awareness. We also want you to speak for yourself. So using, for example, I statements, not on behalf of your identity, we feel, we are, or other identities, they think, they are. We understand that we want to listen to understand and not to respond. In this space, we want to take the time to process what you're hearing and to avoid negative judgments or language and name calling, for example, and be open to feeling uncomfortable in all of this growth. We want to acknowledge harm. So for example, if we're talking and engaging, or even just within ourselves, acknowledge that harm and say, oops, I think what I meant to say, or what I did say may have caused harm. In this space, we want you to be gentle with yourselves and learn as you grow, as we all grow, and reflect on any harm you may cause. Hold yourself accountable and allow yourself to move forward as we're in this discussion. Understand that groups of a single race have multiple perspectives, and even that most your diverse groups will have missing perspectives. As diversity in aquatics, we're not saying we know everything or we represent all people, but we understand that our umbrella is very inclusive because that is what makes us strong. We want to ask you to stay engaged no matter what happens or how you feel, and take a moment if you're feeling frustrated or misunderstood, but don't drop out, don't give up. We want to understand that it's important we listen and to not dominate the conversation. And making sure when we're in our groups in this space that everyone gets a chance to speak and be heard. Don't expect resolution from this. Let's just be in complete agreement that there aren't any necessarily definite answers. And understand that what we say in this space stays in this space. And what is learned in this space leaves the space. This is the discussion, not a debate or a lesson. And so with that, next slide, please. We'd like to just share some of the norms around this. We want us to engage and be in the moment. And we want to stay present and engaged as best as possible. We want everyone to be respectful of everyone's time, as everyone is encouraged to speak in this space. Again, we want you to speak your truth. We want to listen for understanding. And this session, as we know, it will end promptly and on time because we're mindful of everyone's time. We want to accept and not expect non-closure, and give and get grace in this safe space of confidentiality as we engage. And so these are just our challenges, our expectations, and our excitement that we want you to open yourselves up to as we engage in today's presentation. Thank you.
And so as we talk about this, I'm getting used to my Britney Spears mic, as I've been told. There we go. But when we're talking about this work, when we're talking about justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, we call this Jedi, right? We're not talking about this Jedi from Star Wars, but we're really talking about the work that needs to be done on a multi-sectoral level of all levels. And it starts with each of us here today. So what do we mean when we're defining justice, when we're defining equity, when we're defining diversity and inclusion? One of the things that's really important for us to have in this space is a basic understanding of those definitions, so that we know if we have that basic understanding, we know where we can go forward from there, okay? So first, let's start with diversity. And a lot of times when we define diversity, it's what we can see, right? It's on that surface level of diversity when we talk about, hey, you know what? They live in a different area, a different zip code. They have different clothes. It's on the individual itself that we're thinking of diversity. But diversity is so much more. It is not just you as an individual, but it's also talking about the relationships that you have. It's talking about what you don't see underneath, your community and what impacts you as an individual towards how you feel and how you view the world. And it is even your society, your circle. So we use this model. I really like this one. You might see how many of you have seen the iceberg one, right? The top of the iceberg, and then you see lower. That as well, but this too. When we're talking about diversity, it's all these realms, these circles of what surrounds your inter and your extra personal feelings in this area. So when we're talking about diversity, it says that practice and quality of including and involving people from different social and economical backgrounds, sexual orientations, and more. And we're going to go into more depth into this. Now, one of my favorites, talking about equity. Equity and equality are not the same thing. And what I like about this and doing the research about this is that this image helps to point the picture into what the work we're trying to do, right? The inequality piece is that tree. Have you ever seen Shel Stevenson, The Giving Tree? That wonderful book. And it talked about the tree and how it was leaning. But this is what we're talking about, the inequality. When we're talking about aquatic spaces, it's who has access and who doesn't have access. When we allocate funds for a splash park in one neighborhood, and then we build a 50-meter diving well with all the bells and whistles in another, are we really, that's the inequality, or not building a pool at all. Equality is, hey, you know what? We're both going to give them pools. We're both going to give them some water. And then equity, though, is making sure we allocate in the right places. But what I want you to think about is the justice work. It's fixing the system that exists. Fixing the tree, not fixing the individuals, but let us take this work and the learning that we're going to have here today towards fixing the tree so that everybody eats. Okay? And one of my favorite quotes I just came across here is, like branches of a tree, we all grow in different directions, yet our roots remain the same. All of us, no matter where, we're coming from water polo, swimming, lifeguarding, our roots are all the same in this work. We all are about water safety. We're all about the learning to swim. So let's us think about how can we make that tree and create it into equity so that everybody gets a chance to eat. Okay. And my last definition is inclusion. And when we're talking about inclusion in this space, a lot of times we talk about social inclusion, pulling out the chair. Hey, come on in. Welcome to the table. Inclusion. But there's more to inclusion than just that social part. Inclusion has to be also about the economic inclusion and also the political inclusion. Who is voting in those spaces? Who has a voice in those spaces towards not only just being in the chair, but being able to push policy, okay? And that economic inclusion is, do we have the economics behind it to make sure those actions happen? So when we're thinking about it, just some great graphics just to help you think broader and have a visual into the work we are going to push today. So in summary, it has, oh, my picture, I took my slide. I wanted to read this slide. Okay, here we go. Diversity is a fact. The fact is we are all different. We all bring something different to the table. And that's the beauty of it. The way I see something is different from how you see something, from how we see something. That's the fact. But equity is a choice. We all have a choice to push the envelope in this realm. And inclusion is the action. And then belonging is the ultimate goal. Everybody to feel welcome into this space. So today, what we're going to do, we have some awesome speakers here today to be a part of this, but we're understanding the why and centering it there. We're going to have a breakouts into the challenges, and we're even going to evaluate together, what does doing the work look like? What does that look like for you? And then hitting to the bottom line. So let's start off with why. Why is this important? Why is that the California Water Safety Coalition has put this as a main part of today? Why is it important for us to be up here on the stage? Everything we do should be centered in the why, okay? Because the truth of the matter is, we can't change the system, and we can't change until we understand what our why is even. So there are things here that Dr. Beale, this is a part of what I did in my study, was to really understand what were the forces to why we have the statistics. Why is it that we have African-American children are more at risk than their peers, that Hispanic and Latino or Indigenous or Native Americans are more at risk? And why are we more at risk in certain areas, apartment pools, or versus outdoor pools, or versus outdoor areas? Why is there more risk? And it's important for us to understand that it's not the individual so much, but there has been systemic things that have happened to have led us to where we are the statistics. When we're talking about pools closing in neighborhoods, we can't even get to getting the statistics down. But we have to understand, why are the pools closing? Why is there a fear of the water? Why are there stereotypes that create a further barrier into this? Why has to be our center point in this discussion. So looking at this, there were systemic things that were done to create the barriers and to create the gaps and disparities of what we see, to create what we see in this room as a part of not only just at risk, but also into leadership and even into policies to get us to where we are. So instead of looking at the individual and the statistics first, we have to start looking at, okay, we understand that now, but why? Why are we at that point? We had federal legislation done that eliminated and segregated communities, which segregated funding. Then it went down to the state level, and then further perpetuated into the practices that are still done today. That is the why to where we are now. But guess what? We are the ones who can change it. This room and every piece of us are the ability to make that change that we see, right? The famous Gandhi quote, "Be the change you want to see." Dr. Beale, anything? I see you now.
Yes, definitely. because one of the things that we also want you to think about is, rather than operating from the negative, one of the things we say is not all negative feedback is bad. Negative feedback used in an appropriate way can yield a positive result. One of the things we say with diversity in aquatics is that we understand and will hear continually the problems, that we are all a part of the structural racism of our country. It's our history. But rather than operating in blame or saying, for example, people can just lift themselves out, and if they just work hard, that's what we're talking about. And understanding, once again, that this is not something that changes overnight, that this work is not something that changes because you have a black, brown, tan, like my children like to say, and if you guys know, Crayola now has a box of colors for I have 4 kids, that's skin tone. And what it shows is the many colors, right, of us. And understand that in order to create change, it's an ongoing discussion, an ongoing process and action that will go on beyond this room. Because like Miriam said, the opportunity and the changes that we seek take work. And it is not something that to be taken lightly, because the reality is money is something that is needed to nurture in spaces when we're talking about equity to give access. But when you're talking about access in the life of a child and the ability to see that as an attainable goal, such as stepping into a pool where they're feeling belonging, and how that can grow into a teacher, a leader, a doctor, an Olympian, a historian. Understand that the history, there is a funds of knowledge that every person, regardless of their ethnicity or race, is coming to a table. However, their journey might have taken them different ways, but the goal can be one that yields a gift that is priceless.
Thank you, Dr. Beale. And absolutely. So when we're going back, circling back to that definition where we had the tree, here's our tree in aquatics. Our tree stems at the root of it being learning to swim and water safety, but it produces the tree from it to fix it. The justice piece is having these opportunities here, which each of us have a privilege to be a part. To being a national champion, an Olympian, an executive director, a lifeguard, and more. What we're trying to do, our tree, is fixing it, the justice, and straining it so that we create the next generation of aquatic leaders. And there's so much in this aquatic space. And I've heard from many of you, and meeting you today is that, hey, I do this, and this is the programming. And this is what we're trying to create for our communities. And so leading into this, I'm going to take it over to Mr. Byron Davis.
Thanks, Dr. Miriam. Guys, I'm excited whenever I get an opportunity to just share, especially to share in this kind of context. I get excited. So what I want to do is pretty much I can bank on the fact that 100% of you guys don't know my background. I'll very quickly. I graduated from UCLA, 8-time NCAA All-American, former American record holder on the national team, missed making the Olympic team by 0.3 of a second. My biggest claim to fame is, yes, I beat Michael Phelps. Yes, he was 14 at the time. But it was head to head, so I just gotta he'll validate that. No, we were at the Santa Clara meet. That's another story. I'll tell you about that later. But the story that I want to share with you actually right now is the story of how I actually fell into this sport. And actually, I came into the sport of swimming by accident. Born and raised in Cleveland, East Cleveland, Ohio. Raised by a single mom. My dad, unfortunately, he decided that he would, sell drugs for a living. And when I was 6, the police found him tied to his bedpost, shot 6 times in the head. And from the ages of 6 all the way through 10, I was kind of hard to handle. And one of the beautiful things that I love about, I think, how just things work out is this. If there's something that you remember from what I share with you right now, let it be this. Open doors make all the difference in the world. And each individual here is an open door. You represent your authority, your platform, your position, your title. The influence that you have within your organization represents an open door. And I'm going to tell you about an open door that made all the difference in my life. Back when I was 10, back in 1980, and Cleveland, Ohio, had this program. I don't even think it exists anymore. They called it Gray Y. And the police athletic league and the fire department and the YMCA got together, and they decided to create this worldwide beautiful opportunity of sports that would bring the white kids from the west side of Cleveland and the black kids from the east side of Cleveland. And in the spirit of sport, under the umbrella of sport, they created Gray Y. And basically it was every Saturday, and over the summer, you would bring all these kids from around the city together, and we would play different sports. And I'll never forget the first day that my mom dropped my best friend and I, Lamar, off to Gray Y. And the whole idea for us was we were told we were going to have an opportunity to play the family sport. And let me just by a show of hands, or someone can yell out, what do you think the family sport was in my family? Basketball, track? No, it was bowling. And the YMCA was the one program where you could sign up for the bowling league. So my best friend Lamar and I, my mom dropped us off one Saturday morning, and we were there, and we were about to sign up for bowling. Well, we got there too late. By that time, my mom was off doing errands, and literally we tried to sign up. It was full. The director sat us in the lobby, and we literally just was bored, twiddling our thumbs. And I don't know about you, but 2 10-year-old boys that were bored, can kind of get into some trouble. Right? We used to play this game called Atomic Tag. I don't know what the kids call it now. But the way the game goes is when your friend least expects it, and especially when they turn their back, you just decide to hit them, right? In the arm and in the back. And then after you hit your friend in the arm and the back, what do you do naturally? Exactly, you run. So that's what I did. I hit Lamar in the back. I ran. We ran up and down the stairs, ran through the gym and everything. People kept stopping us and putting us back in the lobby. And I'll never forget the last time I ever hit Lamar. And it was, I remember him running, and he was running. He ran through the gym, ran through the locker room, and all of a sudden he stopped. But by that time, I had already taken flight. And I was literally flying through the air, and I hit Lamar, and it made this huge sound in his back. And then when he turned around, he gave me that look. If I catch you, I'm going to kill you. How many of you guys ever had that look growing up by your friend, right? I saw that look. I got up, I ran through the locker rooms, ran through the showers, kicked open this blue door. Guess where I was? The pool. What's the one thing we tell the kids never to do on the pool deck? Don't run. I understand why. Because I ran out onto the pool deck and I slipped. Not only did I slip, I slid. Not only did I slide, I fell into the pool, slid into the water. And at that moment, as fate would have it, a guy comes over and runs over, and he literally just yanks me, pulls me out of the water with one hand and sets me down. And at that moment, I thought that I was going to get in huge trouble, because at this time I was, maybe this tall. And yet I saw this long, lanky, 6'4" white guy with the mullet and the handlebar mustache, getting me. And I'm about, I'm thinking, okay, this guy's just going to just wail into me. I'm not supposed to be here, right? Well, instead of that, he sits me down on the bench right by the pool, and he starts talking to me, and he's pointing to the pool. And at this time, I'm seeing all these kids laughing and playing, and they would jump into the water, and they would go underwater and touch the ground, and they would go to the other side, and they would get out, and they were just laughing, and they were playing what we now know as sharks and minnows. Any of you guys know that game, sharks and minnows? It's the trick that you play on kids if you want to recruit them to swim, right? Because you get in and they start playing, and then you start training them. Well, he was showing me sharks and minnows, telling me how great and how cool the sport is. And all the while he was talking to me, guess who walks through the door? Not Lamar, someone who's far more intimidating. My mom, exactly. Mom walks through the door, and I see the look on her face. If I catch you, I'm gonna kill you. Because why was I in the swimming pool? Well, Jeff Armstrong, who happened to be the coach, the guy that was talking to me, saw that look on my mom's face, took her out to the lobby, and they had a conversation. I don't know, that conversation seemed like it took an eternity. Probably was only a couple of minutes, but when they both came back in, Jeff says, guess what? You made the swim team. And that's how I got involved in the sport of swimming at Euclid Y, and I was a part of Euclid Y Dragonflies from the age of 10 all the way to the age of 16. And I got to tell you, it was one of the best mistakes I've ever made in my entire life, because it was one of the first opportunities that allowed me to one, discover a few things. Number one, I discovered what we now know as our learning style in the swimming pool. Before I started swimming, I struggled in the classroom. And yet when I started training in the water and had that structure given to me, I realized that if I could see it, and then I could model it, I could do it, then I could learn it. You know, I was a kinesthetically visual type of learner. Well, I started to actually experiment in the classroom with that. I started raising my hand a lot, and I was like, if you can just show me an example, and if I had an opportunity to demonstrate it or model it or mimic it, I could learn it. And so I attribute swimming, the open door opportunity, to why I started to excel in the classroom. Last thing, and I'll give the mic back, but you know, swimming was that one sport that literally took me all over the city at first. Every Saturday, I would go to a different part of the city, so it opened up a whole new world for me. Pretty soon, it introduced me to the state and to states, and before it was all said and done, the sport of swimming took me all over the world. Again, I graduated from UCLA, spent the time on the national team, American record holder, and then I now have an opportunity like this to give back to the sport. But my big encouragement to you is this: each and every one of you, somehow in some way, can be that Jeff Armstrong for someone else's kid, in life. You're that open door. And what we're going to be experiencing and challenging you with this morning are, okay, how do you navigate the realities that you are in, the bureaucracy, just the life, you guys, I know, you're overworked, underpaid, you've got 48 hours in a day that you have to, complete stuff. But even in the midst of all of that stuff, how can you, and this is how we're going to challenge you today, you have to come up with the answer. We're going to give you a lot of questions. We're going to make you very uncomfortable. But your job this morning is, how do I become that catalyst for some other kids? How can I be that open door that just may be the difference in that person's life?
Absolutely. So this goes into our exercise. We're going to turn it on to you. So we're going to go through and have a grouping of discussions. So we have some facilitators in the crowd. And this is an exercise I do with our teachers. It's called Think, Pair, Share. Has anybody heard of that before? Think, pair, share. I've got some nodding heads. Okay, good. So think, pair, share allows us, let's think about the question that is up on the board. When we're about to attempt the work, we started off with understanding first a why. We've got a story from Byron that talks about who it was, the catalyst. But now I want you to think of, what are your challenges towards you being able to do this work? Being that coach like Jeff had, or being that person that is going to be able to open the doors, as he said. So what are some of the challenges that are centered around of doing the work of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion? We're going to give you 5 minutes first to think about that at your tables, and you're going to discuss it at your tables and talk amongst each other. Introduce yourself if you don't know your table. Hi, my name is, thank you, and here's what my thoughts are. And then what we're going to do is your facilitators will come to your tables and have you talk about and share with another table what your table discussed. But in this work, have somebody that's going to be your spokesperson. So you got to choose that too. All right. Are we ready to go?
They talked about what it looks like in their communities and how to get started when they're trying to make the effort and it's not working. If anyone else would like to speak, I did just ease her up a little.
Good morning. A very interesting conversation because we come from very different agencies. So we talked a lot about the awkward conversations, and a lot of our agencies have started a Jedi task force. I'm in San Bernardino, and we just hired a DEI officer. But with that comes this huge challenge of one individual trying to create this task force in a major city. So that's one of the awkward conversations of how do we say it and why are we only funneling it right now to one person versus an entire city or a group of employees. Second was resources. Obviously, everybody's struggling with lifeguard shortages, but also resources for us meant, and we're talking about San Bernardino again, it's like we have 6 pools, no heaters. How do we teach kids to swim in cold pools? So for us, the resources beyond just lifeguard shortages, I got to get heaters in the pool. So our fixing of the trees, getting heaters. And then we talked about growth mindset. A lot of biases are happening right now. And also there's defensiveness when we start having these conversations sometimes. And so how do we work together with our Jedi task forces to have the awkward conversations, create the resources, and have that growth mindset?
One of the things we discussed at our table is not necessarily being able to find the people who need it most. For example, a lot of people in this room probably grew up swimming and maybe their parents swam and that's how they got into it. And when you have kids, those kids are going to be going into swimming. But a lot of people who maybe didn't grow up swimming, they don't think, oh, we need to enroll our child in swim lessons. And so they're not reaching out to us. So a difficulty a lot is finding the people who need it most rather than the people who just want it.
We got someone over here. Yeah. All right. I got John. We'll go next. Yeah.
I want to say something to what was your name? I'm sorry. Tim. I just wanted to springboard off of, and amplify what he's saying. It's there comes, and I was speaking to Rick about this as well earlier. There comes a point where intentionality is the name of the game. Jeff Armstrong, it wasn't in his paid his title. He didn't get paid to just invest in me and come up with creative ways and that sort of thing. So a lot of times being intentional and taking that initiative to reaching out and finding those kids or the resources. No one's going to give you, shocker, no one's going to give you a medal for this. You're not going to get an award. No one's going to pat you on the back on these things, but it's par for the course. This is part of what you are signing up for, and it's desperately needed.
Tony Scholl.
And just so we're clear, I did not raise my hand. For us at our table here, we represented Santa Barbara, Orange, and LA counties. So we came up with, we had just a lack of pools for people to go to. And then a lot of it came down to pool access. We charge money to get in the pools, and not everybody has the money to go down to jump in the pool for an hour just to play around and swim. Then with the pools that there are available and even the coastline that we have available is just the programming. For the pools that we run or I want to run, we have an hour and 15 minutes Monday through Friday in the summertime for people to come in. And other than that, it's all structured out with lap swim in, swim teams, all those stuff that we do in the pools, but it's just not there for people to come in and swim. And then we put down recruitment not just for lifeguards, but for the access of coming to our pools. One of the pools I have in the summer, we offer free recreation swim, and it's a 2-hour swim in mid-afternoon in the summer, and it is underutilized. It's a small pool. It only has a capacity of 40, but we have about 15 people in there Monday through Friday. It's just about getting the people to those locations to jump in and swim and let them play. So that was us.
Okay, hi. Okay, so this is gonna be a long-winded one, and I have to tell you this. We have two. We have cultural, and we have physical. So we'll do physical barrier, right? The uncomfortable conversation about skin color, hair, dry, right? We had the different types of skin color and who doesn't want to be in the sun, who doesn't want to get tan, who doesn't want to get dried out. That would be our physical. Our cultural was, and I'm going to give you this example because I think this was like the biggest eye shocker for me. We have a program called Beach Rangers, and we take inner city kids from Huntington Beach, inner city. I give that air quotes. We bring them over to the beach, and they're Hispanic. And I had the kids in line. We're doing our mock junior guards, like have them going out in the water and running into the water, getting wet. One little boy runs to the water line. Big toe, doesn't even touch the water. I'm like, come on, bud, get out there. Get out there. And he goes, no, I can't touch the water. My mom said I will die. So that goes back to the cultural. It's in the cultural for our community. It's a cultural thing. So that's our stymie.
One more. Hi guys, my name is Chris Maloney. I'm with LA County, and we should try not to repeat the same things that we've already gone over. We kind of broke ours into 3 little categories here. We got a disconnect, and then we have things that are out of our hands, more systemic issues, and then things within our hands. So I'll kind of break those into those groups. So the disconnect, if there's certain recruiting events that we have that are on the calendar, if I show up, there's just a disconnect with my experience, life experience, and whoever I'm trying to recruit. So we try to find people that are maybe from the neighborhood, or at least reflect the neighborhood a little bit better to lead those recruitments. So sometimes we have a lack of credibility, lack of relation, or like relatability, and sometimes like connectedness. So that's one of our challenges. Out of our hands, same thing as everyone, funding. We are looking for ready to go lifeguards that in 10 days can be a lifeguard. You already have to be a good swimmer. We can't make you a good swimmer in 10 days. So where does that lead us? That leads us to within our hands, which is youth programs. We've got the water program, which you guys are going to hear about, or maybe you heard about in the other room yesterday. Junior lifeguards, of course, that was how I got in. And swimming, as we heard, starts at around 10 to 14 years of age. So we got to get those kids that are just at the beach or kind of around, and we got to try to find them when they're 10 and bring them into these programs. It's a 10-year process to make a lifeguard, and it starts, when they're like in that 8 to 10 range. So that's what we kind of came up with. And I kind of like to preach to the people that will listen when I'm just lifeguarding in red shorts on the beach, that everybody on the beach you should look at them as like a possible recruit, like any little kid on the beach. So we got little like quarter-page little deals that say how much, you can make this much as a lifeguard. Here's the tryouts, blah, blah, blah. And I tell every lifeguard here, hand that out to like not only the kid that already looks like a lifeguard that's going to be a lifeguard next year, but the kid that's like, little kid and their parents be like, yeah, make some money. So yeah, That's what we came up with.
Hello, from the City of Los Angeles, Recreation and Parks. That's where our table represents here, along with the City of Ontario here. And as far as relation and talking with the City of Ontario, they have a lot of homeowners associations, and a lot of new people are just not aware of the water. In my community where I work at as well, a lot of people never seen the water. I mean, we have a lot of year-round facilities that are open year-round, as well as open water facilities. And a lot of the people in the community, don't take the, well, at least we try to provide a lot of access to our pools, which our department has done a really good job. But the awareness of the importance of being safe around the water, especially our African American and Latino communities, and just getting that outreach out. And I think, as the presenter presented earlier, is that the inequities that we feel, some parts of the cities and partly in many cities across California, there are some high tax income areas that get a lot of resources into their community sections in their cities. And the other parts that, don't have that tax base, to get that support in that area. And I think that's the inequities that we still see in our communities, is to get that outreach out there to show these communities and the people that come to our pools, especially the African American and Latino communities, how important it is to be safe around the water. And I think that's a real challenge, and I think that we're trying to experience, is to get that education out to them and to let them know the opportunities that they can have, employment, teaching their family members to be safe around the water. And I think that's kind of one of our biggest issues that we have, at least in our city, is to really try to get the outreach to those people that really need it. And I think that's it. Right? Anything else? No.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Matt Thompson, City of Ontario. Just to, I guess, follow up what Navarre had mentioned. So some of what we've been slapped in the face with recently over the last year and a half or so is the community education aspect of it. So we've got a lot of new housing development going in the south end of the city, a lot of area that all used to be dairy farms, no open bodies of water in Ontario, but a lot of new pools. So we've had a lot of families moving into these new whether it's apartments, condos, townhomes, single family dwellings, but a lot of new communities, a lot of new pool access. For years, we didn't have any drownings in the city. Over the last year and a half or so, where some of our community outreach has been stalled with COVID, and these construction projects have continued and people have continued to move in, we've had 3 drownings in the city over about a year and a half period, all in the south end of our city, all in these new housing developments, new pool access. So I'd say we've just been slapped in the face with the community education and outreach that really needs to be addressed in our community right now.
Thank you all for sharing that. These are so important. We talked about so many of the different barriers in place, and we could spend all day going through just the barriers, but we want to move to some more beyond the barriers, is to see and the language and how we're using barriers as the stop rather than the forward movement.
Yeah.
Okay. There we go. Yes. Oh. Go for it.
Right.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Good morning. Our table is a mix of both private sector and public, representing LA County and Southern California. I'm just going to be very largely inclusive here. So in terms of looking at the umbrella of justice and equality, diversity, inclusion, here are some of the things that we came up with and we found that we had some challenges with. In the public sector for like LA County and some of the public pools, looking at some of the resources that were lacking. So some of these resources that we came up with and the challenges were obviously bureaucratic red tape, some of the challenges with getting resources when you're having to go through 7 steps and 7 layers to just get one program going. That can be really challenging. In addition to that, also having some challenges with in the equity space, looking at the differences in your populations and having enough resources to accommodate them. So using some specific examples, when you have individuals that need female-only pool swim time, or individuals that have language barriers and your facility either can't staff that or is struggling to respect that. Combine that with when you have your fellow pool patrons who might not also be respectful, understanding, or inclusive of that mentality, makes it really challenging to create an inclusive space for your facility. Conversely, from the private sector, we see that a lot too, and I'm going to speak from personal experience that many of the aquatics facilities in San Diego County, we cater to a lot of Indian families, and there does tend to be sometimes some misunderstandings or lack of understanding or lack of respect of cultural differences that have had to require some retraining with staff, some education, some redirection of resources and opportunities for swim schools and aquatic facilities to be respectful of that. We also serve a lot of Asian populations, African-American communities, and there's a lot that we have had to retrain staff in the private sector that is slightly different than public municipal pools, because unfortunately there is a little bit of a difference of resources when you're looking at private sector swim schools and aquatics facilities. And so that's a conversation that has had to come into play with training these staff members that may not have a lot of this education, training, and background coming from a respectful and inclusive place. And then finally, we just finished up with the lack of available staff training and the challenges with staff training due to the challenges of representation. Because if you're training a staff on diversity inclusion and your entire staff is upper middle class and Caucasian, how is that going to resonate with the staff and the population that you're actually trying to make a difference with? So, hope this helps. Thanks.
No, that is great. I mean, I loved what everybody was sharing, and thank you all for allowing the space to share the challenges that you've been facing. And what I'm hearing is that many of these challenges fit into different themes, right? People talked about cultural, infrastructure, financial, societal, curriculum barriers that exist in this space. But there's a lot more too. We also talked about the deep layers of barriers. That is biases and training that we have to do for our employees so that we have the culturally and linguistically diverse languaging and welcoming environment for communities to be a part of. One of the things that we also heard, this is what in this space is that in DEI, we can't continue to think inside that box. We can't continue to use that same box to do the work that it doesn't fit into. DEI itself is so massive and diverse, and working outside of our aquatic environments to partner with better business bureaus or DEIs in our communities, or working with special interest groups in our communities, such as the Hispanic Association or better business bureaus for Black businesses and more, so that it's not just on one person and what I heard in one space, that it is really that multi-sectoral. Because there are things that are beyond the barriers that even those who are in the aquatics have to that we are still facing. While some get to go home and you're like, whew, that was hard work. This is an everyday thing still, okay? And Dr. Beale, if you're still there, I know you were talking about some important things before I go to my next slide.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I know technology. So, and to everything that we're saying, one of the things that we want to reiterate is that this work is not easy. This work is not one and done. And so as we were speaking, I want us also, as we said before, there are multiple layers that we're all engaging in this space. But some of the things we heard also was going back to that vocabulary of they, we try to get those communities, those people, and they just weren't ready to get it, or we couldn't find them. One of the things, it could be as small, some of the changes or the challenges of just engage and support, right? Let's talk about that, change it to that positive. the supportive efforts that we would want to take from this is, these are challenges. Let's say this, these are challenges. However, now we want you to add a different seed. We want you, while we're going through and continuing on, to start also thinking about then changes. And what we mean when we say changes is, for example, how many of you in public health, the reality is if you're engaging multiple communities, inclusive of our own, has a question ever been asked about the programming you're considering, that in terms of getting to know the communities where you are? How many of you have actually walked in the communities that you're actually sharing programming in? How many of you have ever taken, for example, a needs assessment to even think about if the programming you're considering is really what the community needs at that time? So, for example, I heard about we want to raise awareness. Sometimes that's the very first step. That's what we at Diversity in Aquatics understand and want to do. Because if you're asking me, for example, to just trust to let my child run into a body of water, but I've never even been asked or informed or shared via any kind of programming about what the benefits of it is, or even maybe thinking about, maybe there's some role models in the community I want to be, offer programming in that I could find just from looking to help actually share building a bridge. Sometimes we have to look at how we can do things differently with the programming that we have. How can we approach it differently? Because that is what is required of this work. With the access of materials that you do have, it's not easy. That's why we say don't give up.
Don't give up. So starting at the question of why. Again, as Dr. Beale said, is being able to think outside that box and partnering with communities and making that change. And one of the people who was influential in making that change at US Water Polo was Mr. John Abdou. So I'll have him give his story now.
Hey, thanks, Dr. Miriam. And I just want to, is this on? Yeah. I just want to say just how grateful I am for Diversity in Aquatics and Dr. Beale, Dr. Miriam, everybody in this room for being engaged in this conversation, and honestly to Rob and Will for including this right into the California Water Safety Coalition. I'm going to fast forward through my personal story because it's not that important in this. But for me growing up, being a swimmer, water polo player, lifeguard, right, all those things, I can go back and I can tell you stories about what my personal experience was like, or being called several racial slurs and having to get into fights and games, and not only by teammates or other players, but coaches as well, right? In our experience and dealing with that. But then you fast forward that into then wanting to really be in the sport as a coach, overcoming that a little bit. Not that is something I want to speak about too much, right? But then getting into giving a coach, right? And really wanting to give back in that sport. And I'll just tell you one quick story, right, to highlight some of this. But I became the head coach at Bucknell University, which is in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. Have anybody been to Lewisburg, Pennsylvania? That's exactly right. There we go. One, right? One. Yeah, that's exactly right. So that's the answer that I expected, right? when you talk about Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. So there's horse and buggies, and this is the middle of Pennsylvania. It's not Pittsburgh, it's not Philadelphia, right? It's Lewisburg, right? Literally right in the middle of the state, And that university was founded in 1876, right? The great university in the Patriot League, right? High academic, highly selective university that's there. I went there as an assistant coach to further my career. I went to get my master's degree in education while I was there. Head coach leaves. I become hired to become the head coach. And I get a call from the athletic director. They call me immediately and they say, "Hey, congrats. You're the new head coach at Bucknell University. I just want you to know that you're the first person of color to ever be a head coach for any of our athletic teams in the history of the university." And I was like, I just want to reiterate, can you repeat that one more time? Because this university was founded in 1876, right? This is 2007, right? 2007, right? Just again, 1876, 2007. I'm like, and I'm the first person of color you've ever hired. And yeah, and we'd love to celebrate that. We want that to be a headline in the press release when it comes out tomorrow. And I said, no. I said, no. I said, I respectfully decline. I accept the job, but please don't put that in the press release, right? I want people to know that I received this job on merit, right? That I hope you hired me for who I am and who I am as a coach, where I was at. Now, I see your face. I see some of my faces. Maybe I would have treated that differently. That was my 26-year-old self, right? That was my 26-year-old self. And I didn't know that it was even a thing in my sport, right? Like, I'm like, what shouldn't the headline be? I was the youngest Division I head coach, right, in the country at that time, right? Who are you guys? You're hiring a 26-year-old dude, right, to be the head coach of both your men's and women's programs at this time. I said, that should be the headline, right, in my mind. So I took a little bit of offense, right? So, fast forward this now in my life kind of into this work and kind of what we're doing in this and getting to fast forward to where we are today. What I have now realized, right? Maybe I would have approached that situation differently, but I want you all to know that we're all learning in this space too, right? That as we grow and learn this is not something that I'm an expert about because of my lived experiences, right? We're not coming here to talk at you. It's just, this is the things we've been experiencing. And now as an administrator, through my experience as a coach, and now getting to this time to being an administrator, being a chief officer in an NGB that's fighting for Olympic gold medals and trying to fight at this level. And that was that work. When the time and the calling came 2 years ago, right, in the summer of 2020, when the time came for, right, well, this work is now right in front of us. We all need to start thinking about this. George Floyd was murdered, right? What are all our organizations going to do about all this? There's a nationwide cry for this. They turned to the water polo guy, right, to the sport guy in the office to turn that. And why did they do that? All right? Why do you think that the board of directors of USA Water Polo, right, the executives of US Water Polo, in the C-suite, right, at the time where I'm sitting, turned to me and said, well, John, what should we do about this? What are you going to do about this, John? I'm like, what? This is my problem, right? Like, this is what I got to do now, right? Like, this is my work, right? And so I want you all to be sensitive in your own places, right? Of putting the work on the people of color in your spaces just because they're the people of color, right? And that's what happened, right? And when my response at that time, which was a more mature response, right, than I think I had in 2006 or 2007, right, when at Bucknell was, I'll take the call in, right? But I want you guys to understand why I'm going to take the call, right? Why I'm going to do this. I want you to understand that I've been talking about these things in this boardroom. I've been talking about these things in the C-suite for the last, 8 years of working at this company, but it's fallen on deaf ears, right? And so now, can you hear me a little bit louder? Does this mean I get to be heard a little bit more, right? Does this mean all those things we were talking about before when I said, hey, we should have a presence at water safety conventions. We should have a presence, right, in our communities to teach people how to swim, right? Let's not just talk about water polo at the highest levels. Let's talk about, I love the diagram that Miriam put up, right, of the tree, right? Because we just talk about how, especially in our space, there's a lot of swimming people in the room, right? We talk a lot about, well, water polo versus swimming, right? And they don't get along, and we got to share the pool, and, and we all fight. But it's like, we actually have something in common, right? We have something that's greatly in common, that you can't play water polo unless you know how to swim, right? And not everyone's going to be the Byron Davises of the world. Not everyone's going to be, national championship swimmers, right? Not everyone's going to come. So can we find more space for people who to learn to swim and more activities for them to be a part of? And water polo can be one of them. So we're all saving lives together. And we say this a lot. Learn to swim is one of the only activities that you can put in your community that can lead to 4 different Olympic sports. There's 4 different Olympic sport tracks that you can take right out of learning to swim, right? And whether that's diving, whether that's artistic swimming, synchro, water polo, right? Obviously swimming itself, right? That in this space, you're going to save a life, and you're going to give 4 tracks that have the highest level of representation in the Olympics, but then also are represented at the NCAA level, high school level, and give kids an opportunity along the way. And that's what we're able to do. So when the calling came in 2020, we started a racial equity and reform task force at USA Water Polo that I co-chaired with one of our 4-time Olympians, Brenda Villa. You may have heard about it at the City of Commerce, right? And we co-chaired this this task force together. And when we start getting into the work that we did and some of the work that's being done, I have to say that now, for me personally, it's one of the things that's kept me in our sport, right? So then full circle to kind of finish the story of going back to my personal experience. And there's times where it's, hey, aquatics maybe not be for me, right? Or maybe there's other things that I may want to do, or there's other things I want to do with my time. And I'm grateful for some of the spaces and the work we're doing because it's kept me in the game, right? And now it gives me a broader understanding, right? A greater understanding that it's not just about trying to win medals or trying to compete at the highest level, that we're here to save lives, right? And how can we affect that saving lives? And that's how I want you all to see the equity work of USA Water Polo, even in the space, because we're in Orange County right now, and our office is 10 minutes away. And this is the California Water Safety. So a lot of you know about water polo being in California at a water safety coalition, right? And we're down the street, and I know a lot of you personally in this room and have had long experiences with you all. I want you to look at the equity work we're trying to do, not to check a box, not the work that's outside of what we're trying to do, right? It's work that we're trying to do in our communities to save lives. because that was the response that some of the responses we received, right? So how we approach this work, and Dr. Beale, I think, said this well, right, earlier, that this is not work to say that this happens outside of our organization. What we're trying to do within ourselves is look at everything we do in a more equitable sense. And if we look at everything we do in a more equitable sense, and we're more equitable in our activities, we're more equitable in our programming, we're more inclusive in our programming, then diversity and all those things are byproducts of that, right? Those things become byproducts. It's not the goal, right? Because I've had people on my sport or board of directors come and say, well, how's your diversity program going, John, right? Have you got more black and brown people to come into water polo? Because that would be great. You know, what do the numbers look like? You know, and I kind of look and I'm like, well, that's not the goal, right? We're not trying to fill quotas, right? We're not trying to just like create a program that lives on the side. What we want to be is how inclusive can we be at the lowest level, at the basic level. If we're inclusive here at the bottom of the tree, like we see, then everything else will be lifted up, right? And my day-to-day job is to make sure our national teams, our Olympic teams are winning. And people ask me all the time, well, why are you doing this work if that's, the goal is the highest level? Well, so I know that the sustainability of our national teams, I know the sustainability of our success at the Olympic level is not going to happen unless we take care of the bottom of the pyramid, right? It's actually more important for us to teach more people how to swim, get more people water safe, get more people involved in the sport so the top of the pyramid can work, right? And I can get into some more examples now. We're going to keep going on the work, but I'd love to stop talking for a second because I'm just humbled around the people that we are with. And but I'd love to get a little bit more into the specifics as time goes on here. And I'm just grateful for everyone to be here today. Yeah.
Awesome. You rocked it. Thank you, John. The work that he did within the task force, I think it's so important by bringing in voices to aid in the efforts. So he wasn't having to be the person to point at and say, oh, what does diversity, equity, inclusion look like? And building that team around you, I think is so important to what he was able to do at Water Polo and have it string throughout the organization. Again, I heard some people have a Jedi, a stream, a channel, but is it also within your mission and your vision of your organization? So it's strung throughout the organization from top to bottom. So it isn't just on one person. Oh yeah, you guys got me to this line. So we're gonna go through our last piece. It's talking, what does the work look like? You've heard all the different things. So now this is our call to action. So we're gonna have you go in your groups in our last few minutes, and I know we're rushing through this, is going back into your groups. Now that you've heard this, you've heard of the challenge, is what does the work look like? What is the outcome? What is the smarter goal that you are trying to accomplish with your organization or even yourself? Because remember, if it's not just, if you're just like, man, my organization is not, but what are you going to do as well? Because it starts with you. It starts with just a spark. They say the mustard seed, right, is that the most powerful seed because of the taste and what it has as a punch. But once you have it, it has such a far range from there, okay? So we're going to take the next 5 minutes, go ahead and talk within your groups, and then we'll call out from there. All right, we're gonna start with, and I'm gonna start with Mr. Abdou, your side, on sharing out some of the call to actions that we have. What does the work look like for you?
All right. Or one of the tables on this side ready to call out, share about your call to action. 1, 2, 3 here. Tony, did you volunteer this time or okay? Volunteer.
Again, I did not volunteer. But I've been told I have a beard, so I have to speak. So what the work looks like for us looks like we would like to team up with our other agencies that we work with and go out to some schools and talk to the kids in there to hopefully get them to come out and swim and join our programs. As well as go to some job fairs and preach that, hey, you learn to swim, you can make some money. Make some money and multiple different careers, not just the water polo and swim teams, but you could be a lifeguard, you could do a lot of things, come down to Newport and you could swim, you could be a firefighter. Another thing that I would like to get started is do a swim instructor's apprentice. So going out into the underserved communities and having some of those people come in and help with our swim programs. If they don't know how to swim, that's fine. You don't need to know how to swim to be a good swim instructor. You could sit there and talk to people and let them be comfortable being in the water. And I think if I'm able to get that program going, and hopefully we'll bring in additional people from the communities where we're trying to get into the pools and the beaches.
Thanks, Tony. And one thing I want to echo kind of with what we're saying and what Dr. Beale is saying too is just this idea of being really intentional about this work. For those of you who struggled through my presentation yesterday, grateful to you. But one thing I mentioned yesterday, and when I was talking yesterday, was about this idea that a lot of your organizations will say that we have this program or we have scholarships for people, we have diversity initiatives, but nobody takes advantage of them, nobody uses them, or we can't find the people to take advantage of our diversity program. I hear this in boardrooms all the time. We'd love to hire more females, but there's no female candidates, right? I hear this all the time. And of course, right, we all kind of get we get frustrated when we hear these things, right? And one thing to do is start building the intentionality of the bridge between whatever program you want to run in your community and bringing those people in, right? Instead of saying, well, they got to find us, right? We find them, right? And we talked about this a little bit yesterday, right? If you're a water polo program, swim program, club in your community, you might have scholarships, you might have programs where you're at. Find the community partner, and that's one thing we're trying to do as Water Polo. Find the community organization in your area that's already doing that work, partnering with them, right? And then bringing those, and then that talent pool comes larger, and we want to facilitate all that work. So it's intentional of what we're doing. And it's no longer about the individual. These people don't want to do this thing. It's like, well, what is the system, right, that addresses that along the way? So your table ready to share? All right. There you go.
So our group, we talked about the cultural differences in exchange between, I guess, having those barriers between lifeguards and swimmers, or lifeguards and families, and people who really needed to make sure that we need to make sure that know how to swim. I think the biggest thing is to make sure that we can start with our staff and start with the people at the top, and who can sort of bring in diversity, like John said, and have programs like Jack and Jill, or have Black student unions, or have Hispanic student unions, and so forth and so on, and sort of bring in those kids and say, well, my lifeguard was Black. Well, my teacher was Black. Well, my instructor was Asian, or I saw myself in her. And then from then on, we can start from the bottom up and bring in diversity that way. I think that was mostly it. I think that's how we can sort of start to change things and start to make progress with this cultural difference and barrier that, swimming and aquatics and water polo and rowing sort of has. So.
Thank you. You got your mic? Go for it. Yeah.
Hey, good morning, folks. I'm Virgil Chancellor. Let me get my back parts away from folks. What we discussed over here at the table was advocates for the youth and a lot of programs to get them out there in the communities. Communications, get the communications out there as far as the programs that are available so that they know. Along with that, what I always advocate is that we talk to the mama bears of the importance of get programs in there for the grandmothers, the aunts, the uncles, or whatever, to get them in the water to find out about water safety, to learn about water safety. They understand the importance of that. They're going to get the children in. As soon as they see something, they say, yeah, I went through this program. I was scared as hell about water, but I went through a program, and yes, we need to get these children in the water. If we have those type of advocates, the mama bears, then we're going to see a big improvement on getting these kids in the water in the aquatics program and aquatic safety. Thank you.
So we were very JG centric at our table, mostly Orange County, San Diego, and mostly operators, lieutenants, and some basically no department heads. I'm kind of a new department head. So to make a change at my level, which I used to be at this level, and watching the last couple of years of not being able to go to an assembly, not being able to get in a pool, can't get pool time, even if the pool didn't have lifeguards, we can't lifeguard ourselves, all that stuff that goes into just trying to reach out and get involved. We're trying to do something at my level was I can pay them to go. Civic engagement policy, I will pay someone to go to every single civic engagement we have on the schedule now that we can do them again. And it makes, at least where I work, it makes everyone kind of happy that we're getting back involved. They get paid, whether it's comp time or overtime. That's my problem to go deal with at the finance director level. But at least now we're actually engaging in something where we went 2 years of just word of mouth and not even being able to get on a pool deck. So we're paying someone to go every time, regardless of its, nature or where it is. It's not volunteer, you're paid overtime. So that was some small thing that we could do, at least where I sit now.
Good. What I'm hearing, which is great insight, and I hope that every table's stealing, because this is the cross-pollination time, right? Hopefully you're getting ideas on how you can create things. But what I'm hearing is we're talking about the ground game, right? How good is your ground game going to be? And that ground game is what's going to create the groundswell that really starts to allow this stuff to take on a life of its own in your organization. Again, I want to just to Jeff Armstrong's horn. He's the unsung hero in my life. My story is not alone. When it was all said and done, there were several Byrons that went through this guy's just radar. And just one thing that stood out to me, there was a point in my career where, again, a single mom, going back to school, job, everything, my mom just couldn't handle it. And she approached me and she said, Byron, I was 14, 2 years in, and I'm just getting traction, just starting to get fast and all. And she's like, I just can't handle it. I just can't get you to the pool. And Jeff stepped up. And he's like, okay, this is going to be for a few weeks, a couple of months. Is that yeah, cool. I'll get off work. I'll drive over to East Cleveland. I'll pick Byron up, take him to practice, and then drop him back off. Well, that 2 months turned into 2 extra years of him doing that. And then before it was all said and done, Euclid Y had a very diverse swim team, right? He recruited 4 other of my buddies to start swimming. And I can go on and on and on, but that's what we're talking about here. It doesn't have to be what is the groundbreaking program that you're going to create or bring to your organization. It is, okay, who's going to be that person that has an awesome creative ground game that starts that ground swell that then takes on a life of its own.
No, but we are running over time, and I really appreciate the flexibility in it. But we're going to go for it. Yes.
Just to step or on the steps that have already been taken here, but Byron, great example. When I was in high school, parents couldn't get up to get me to work or to workouts back when we had actual morning workouts at 6 a.m. And so my coach would drive 8 miles in the opposite direction to pick me up every morning. And I just thought about that while I was reminded of that with Byron's story. It was awesome. But our table, we're talking about a hurdle that I'd never really thought about before, having been a supervisor. But they went out to the local school and offered their services to come out and talk to the kids. And as you see, the firefighters and the lifeguards today wearing their blues, and we always want to look sharp and present a great image. But the principal said, if you're going to come and give an educational program, or we send them to you, don't wear this uniform. Don't wear this uniform. And there was new, and after all these years, 34 years of actually done the work and things, I've never encountered that. But it seems simple. It seems against our mission, though, sometimes. Like, we want to show professionalism, and sometimes our reds and our T-shirts get a little grungy because you're in and out of the water, making rescues, first aids, whatever. And it may not be the best image to project, but to have that as a hurdle, it's something that we need to be aware of, that the image of the blue shirts now and the red trunks might be the way that we're going to be welcomed into a community, rather than looking overly official in our blues and our badges. So that, I think that was, to me, that was a eye-opening after all this time.
So you're talking about working, I think you mentioned a very important thing, working with the principal, right? The principal was your gatekeeper to understanding that community. And that's what Dr. Beale and John and Byron have been talking about, is working with communities, working with somebody, working alongside and not being just the authoritative in that space. There is so much, you guys, that we could go on and on. This could be its own, as a matter of fact, it is its own conference. For us at Diversity in Aquatics, this is what we're talking about at our conference, nonstop, and listening to programming and more from each other about this diversity, equity, and inclusion and justice work, the Jedi work in this space, because it is so broad and so deep in what we need to do. But as Byron said, I love what he said, it's the groundwork. It is a simple day-to-day task that we can do to take away into the work that's going to help all boats rise in this area. So for myself, in concluding today, I do want to say thank you. Thank you for having us in this space. It is the start of being in this space, but it isn't the finish, okay? We're the first leg in the relay race here, but there is more work to be done, okay? And I hope we are invited back next year because there is more work. I want to hear about the progress that you've made to going to schools, to being able to having a task force in hand. What does that look like on the next level? And so thank you all. Good luck. If you need assistance, there are multiple of us here that can be your start towards the work that you're doing in this space. Again, thank you. And also thank you to the Zach Foundation and of course the California Water Safety Coalition today. Thank you.